Kansas. Thank you very much. Hello, Kansas. Thank you.
President Trump speaks to a packed crowd at the Kansas Expo Center tonight. Hear what the president tells Kansans ahead of November's election. Good evening and thanks for joining us for our special coverage of President Trump's visit to Topeka this evening. I'm Brittany Moore. We are bringing you team coverage all throughout the city tonight. We are live tonight at the Kansas Expo Center where the president spoke at a rally earlier this evening. We will also check in at Forbes Field where the president has now left the capital city tonight. But first, KSNT News anchor Brooke Lennington traveled with the president throughout the evening in the motorcade while in the capital city. She joins us now. Brooke, you had a chance to see the president up close tonight.
That's right. I was able actually to get a one-on-one interview with President Trump just minutes before he walked down on stage tonight. And we were the only local station that had an exclusive pass to be with Trump as he made his way off the plane and to the rally. It was too gloomy outside to see the president's plane land, but it was hard to miss as it slowly started making its way toward us.
All right, follow me on this side.
We had to move fast to get right under the wing of Air Force One as President Trump made his way down the steps. He took his last step and then went to shake hands with Governor Collier and Secretary of State Chris Kobach. He then immediately made his way over to our direction and started talking about the Kavanaugh confirmation.
He's an outstanding man, an outstanding person. What they put him and his family through.
Then he greeted a few people waiting for him on the tarmac, and then we were off. We hopped in a van just a few cars in front of the president's limo and made our way to the Expo Center. Once we got there, we went to a private area of the Expo Center where a makeshift interview area was set up. President Trump walked in, we shook hands, and then I started firing away, asking him why he chose to come to Topeka. He told me he thought for a second there he would have to cancel his trip because of the Kavanaugh vote.
In fact, in theory, I shouldn't be in Kansas right now. I'm supposed to be back in Washington, but I said there's no way I'm canceling the tens of thousands of people. I guess they have 11,000 people in the room, and there's a lot of people outside. So I think if I would have said, by the way, I'm going to cancel, Kansas wouldn't have liked me too much, and that's never going to happen.
And of course, that's only a short snippet of our interview. I also asked him about how Kansas farmers could benefit from the recently drafted trade deal, and even a few questions viewers posted on my Facebook page. We'll be airing more of my exclusive interview with the president tomorrow night on KSNT News at 10. You won't see it anywhere else but here, obviously. So make sure to join me tomorrow night for that.
All right, we are looking forward to that, Brooke. Thank you. The president spoke at a rally at the Kansas Expo Center in support of two local GOP candidates. And that's where we find KSNT News evening anchor Jace Mills right now. Good evening, Jace. Well, Jace is at the Expo Center tonight. There were about 10,000 people at the rally. We were told by Chris Kobach's campaign that over 20,000 people had claimed tickets for the campaign. And Jace was there all evening long to learn more about what the rally was going to be like, what the topics that President Trump was discussing. He will be coming up shortly here in the show tonight. Jace is available now, so good evening, Jace.
Hi, good evening, Brittany. Sorry about that. Tonight, as you can see, people are starting to tear down what was the area where the president was speaking. The lights are coming down. Just about everything that was set up tonight for the president. 10,000 people about were in the Expo Center, as that's the most that it can hold. We're told thousands of other people were outside of the Expo Center tonight watching the president's speech on jumbotrons. The Kansas Republican Party chairman told me tonight that 45,000 people requested tickets to this event. Of course, as you mentioned, the president in Topeka to campaign and help Chris Kobach, who's running for governor, and Steve Watkins, who's running for Congress. Both men addressed the crowd tonight. The big news, obviously, as Brooke mentioned a little bit as well, was Brett Kavanaugh, the president coming out for the first time publicly since Brett Kavanaugh was nominated in the U.S. Senate this afternoon. He announced that he signed that commission while aboard Air Force One en route to Topeka. He also talked about that his staff had asked him to cancel this rally because of that nomination vote.
And I proudly signed the judge's commission aboard Air Force One just before landing. They said, could you call the people of Kansas and tell them we won't be able to make it tonight? I said, I don't have the courage to do that. the courage. I said, I don't have the courage.
And the president also touching on immigration, taxes, foreign policy, a whole slew of issues here at the Expo Center tonight. He also talked about that new trade deal with Canada and Mexico that replaces NAFTA. He said it's going to help Kansas farmers. And Brittany, while the country might be divided on President Trump, while there might be division outside of the Expo Center, tonight the people here were united behind the president. That was for sure. Brittany, I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Jace. And as he just mentioned, tonight outside the Kansas Expo Center, protesters lined up to speak out against President Trump. KSNT News reporter Reina Garcia is in central Topeka outside the Expo Center with what the protesters had to say about the president's visit. Reina.
Brittany, earlier Topeka Boulevard was lined with hundreds of protesters. Now they started arriving here around 1:30 this afternoon, while another group started gathering at the State House around 5. Now I spoke with one of the participants who says while protesting can certainly get voices heard, it's what people do in November that can really make a difference.
Voting is so important. We can shout and we can protest and we can think that this is making a true difference, but the only real difference that ever is going to come is us being in the polling place.
Many of the protesters I spoke to say this is just one way they're hoping to bring change, and they'll see whether it paid off or not during the upcoming election. Live at the Expo Center, Reina Garcia, KSNT News.
Thank you, Reina. And President Trump is no longer in Topeka now. He left after his rally to head back to Forbes Field National Air Guard Base. KSNT News reporter Hannah Brandt has been there all evening long with details on the president's departure.
Brittany, the president and his motorcade came back here to Forbes Field a couple of hours ago. They were, of course, getting back onto Air Force One and heading home to Washington, D.C. Air Force One touched down in Topeka around 5 p.m. at Forbes Field, and President Trump was greeted by the friends and family of local service members. His departure was closed to visitors, but heading back on Air Force One with him is his 2020 campaign manager, Brad Parscale. Parscale is a Topeka native, and I sat down with him this morning to talk about what Trump's visit to his hometown means to him.
Trump's here to show support for candidates that he believes in. And also, Kansas is an important state. You know, it's sometimes, again, that's what Trump's about, not forgetting us. You know, other candidates probably wouldn't come here, you know, because it wouldn't be good enough for them. But you know what? He wants to come here and tell people that he's with them. He's fighting for them. There's millions of people that live here.
And he actually arrived in Topeka last night. He met up with some old local friends at the restaurant The Pennant in downtown Topeka. As for what's next, Parscale says he and the president are laser focused on the midterm elections. Only once those are over in just about a month, then they'll start focusing on the 2020 campaign. Live from Forbes Field, Hannah Brandt, KSNT News.
Thank you, Hannah. And as we had said, tonight's rally is in support of two GOP candidates looking to win seats in November. The president is supporting Republican Chris Kobach in the race for governor and Steve Watkins in the race for Kansas's 2nd district seat. Kobach is running against Democrat Laura Kelly and independent Greg Orman. The president is also throwing his support behind Steve Watkins for Congress. Watkins is now in a close race and says this could make a big difference for his campaign against Democrat Paul Davis.
It's really neat when you've got everybody coming together and an event like a presidential speech. Like I say, I remember when I was 8 years old in 1975 and it happened. So I think a lot of kids today will remember this, and 40 years from now they'll be saying, yeah, I remember when President Trump came to Topeka. That was so cool.
Donald Trump is a fighter. He fights for America first. He fights to keep our borders secure.
In the meantime, Kansas Democratic candidates and volunteers are rallying together today to encourage voters for the November election. The Kansas Democratic Party is calling this a day of action. Now, this comes amidst President Trump's rally at the Kansas Expo Center this evening. Paul Davis, a 2nd congressional district candidate, stopped by the Shawnee County Democrats' office today, where he made a phone call to voters.
It's really the critical thing that we need to be able to win this election. We've got to get on a lot of doorsteps, and we've got to contact a lot of voters, and we're getting it done, and I'm extraordinarily grateful to all the people who are making it happen.
Paul Davis is also commenting on Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court vote and swearing in today. He says it is time to move on, but he encourages people to keep going to Washington to unite the country. Coming up on KSNT News at 10 o'clock, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. Right after the break, we bring you to Wamego for today's Oktoberfest celebrations.
And from the Commander-in-Chief to Chiefs Kingdom tomorrow, if you're planning on heading out to Kansas City, you'll be dodging some raindrops once again as temperatures only get into the 60s. But we'll be dealing with a fair amount of rain right here in northeast Kansas. But when will we finally dry out? A closer look at that is still to come.